Well, hi everyone. I hope you're doing really well today. It's really exciting to be at Top Draw in a real life event. I hope everyone's enjoying themselves. I'm Laura, this is Jo, and this is Sarah, and we're here to give a masterclass for the next sort of 40 minutes, really, all around how to make better, more kind of conscious colour decisions. I'm just going to cover a little bit about what we're actually going to talk about, and then I'm going to introduce everybody properly. It's become really, really pertinent, I think, sort of sustainability and being wasteless has become a very, very important topic, I think we've all found. So this presentation is more about how to make more ethical, wasteless, better, more mindful choices about colour and materials in the products that you might be making. We're going to talk about how colour actually can be a way to navigate that, because it's actually a really big topic. I'm sure everyone's really kind of working through it as well. We're going to talk about the circular economy a little bit and how colour fits into that, and really looking at practical ways of recycling, reincorporating, rather than a kind of take, make and waste linear system. Some top tips about how you can sort of do that with your products. And we're also going to be highlighting some top draw exhibitors as well. So we've all picked out some people that are doing some really awesome work. So we're going to be talking about their approaches. So this isn't necessarily a presentation all around the next season's colours. It's more about approaches to colour through being more mindful, more considered, more conscious. So it's for a variety of different people. So brand owners, designers, anyone that's kind of making products as well, and who's taking on new product kind of directions too, I think. So that's just a little bit about what we're going to talk about. I have really noticed the shift in terms of my practice. Lots of people wanting to know much more about how they could be more conscious and mindful with materials and colours, wanting to know lots more about sustainability than ever been before. It's becoming a really integral part of everybody's practice, all the way through from choosing colour, all the way through to consumer appeal, and ways that it can be natural or incorporated in recycling methods as well. So my practice has definitely shifted. I've also just launched a book which is called The Colour Bible, which you can kind of see on the stand over there. That was actually written in lockdown, so it covers 100 shades in art and design. It highlights lots of different colours, but also lots of new colours that are coming through. So in terms of natural colour, lots of kind of waste colours and interesting colours that we're sort of starting to see around us that are becoming more important, I think, within design. So that's who I am. I'm just going to pass you over to Sarah, who's sat next to me.
Hello, just check that was... Yep, that's working. I'm a brand writer and storyteller. I'm the founder of Stories Design. I basically work with brands, particularly creative brands and designers, to try and tease out different stories already in their work, because I think sometimes when we're designing, we're so up close to what we're doing that we don't realise how interesting some of the stories and processes within our work are, and it can help to have a different pair of eyes, look at those and help tease those out. And then I help people communicate those visually and verbally by creating brand guidelines, maybe colour palettes, maybe verbal identities through lexicons, tone of voice, all of that sort of thing. So all my work is basically connected to design and story. And as Laura has just said, I've seen a real shift over the time that I've been working towards both in my own practice, choosing to work with designers who want to take a more sustainable approach, but also that all designers kind of are feeling that pull that we need to address these issues, but how do we do it? Because we're making things, we're putting things out into the world, and that can feel a bit of a vulnerable situation when you want to do no harm. So I think it's a really interesting time to be a creative, and I hope that some of what we're talking about today can help just make that more exciting and less take some of the vulnerability away.
Okay, Jo.
Hi, everybody. My name's Joanna Thornhill, and I work as an interior stylist. I do trend forecasting for WGSN, the trends agency, and I do writing as well. And I've also written 3 books, the latest of which is called The New Mindful Home, which is also over on the stand over there, published by Lawrence King. I guess my work, the reason I wrote the new Mindful Home was because I was just interested in ways that kind of psychology and neuroscience can feed into how we can help our homes support our well-being and ultimately our happiness. And a big part of that as well for me is the sustainability angle as well. Of sometimes it feels like in our industry it's kind of pushing the buying of more things. So it was partly me trying to figure out how to sort of square that off and just encourage and inform people how they can do that in a slightly more sustainable, ethical way. So yes, I am interested in all of that. I talk a bit about colour psychology in the book as well, and just sort of tie it all into the home.
Yeah, so really we're going to be tying together colour and sustainability and showing some really actionable ways that you can work with both, basically. And so feel free to ask us any questions at the end or come and pick our brains at any point. We will be here after the talk as well. So I'm just going to move on to talk a little bit about a fly. A fly has come to see me today as well. It's nice. Just to talk a little bit about the importance of kind of colour in design and how it's an integral part of everything that we kind of create, really. It's kind of its ability to create consumer appeal, set moods, change the tone of an environment, create a feeling of well-being. It's an incredibly important aspect of product design. And it can also solve problems in new ways as well. It offers lots of meaning, and I think within this kind of context of sustainability and better ethical choices, it's actually giving us a lot more to consider than it's ever done before, and it can actually offer us some real tangible answers to why we should choose and change our practices and our methods for the better. So the next slide highlights a little bit about a piece of work that Sarah and I have worked on this year, which is called the Circular Manifesto for Colour. It's something that we decided to publish and put out together. It's published on Medium, and it's a designer's guide to, I suppose, working in much more kind of ethical, sustainable and circular ways with colour. Some top tips around how to start working with recycled colour or start using natural colour within your work. And sort of exemplars of other brands and really great people that are kind of doing that already. And so that's available online and you can access it. It's completely free. And so this presentation really brings 3 of those trends out for the top drawer audience, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But I just wanted to highlight to you guys that it's kind of there as a resource because we've had lots of great feedback from lots of different businesses, haven't we? So small makers all the way through to big brands that are really, everyone's trying to develop their own sort of sustainability strategy and their own approach to this big kind of topic about waste. And so this really highlights some different ways that you can kind of do that in a kind of practical way. So I would just, invite you to kind of have a look really on Medium. And so one of the main kind of points really is that in order to be kind of circular, it's about looking at the entire process. So a lot of the work that I do is specifying colours and materials, but helping brands connect through their entire product life cycle. And really, to achieve real circularity, you need to connect lots of different dots, but kind of colour can be something that can be like an inroad into it and a sort of avenue to explore, really. And so I think a lot of us are in this sort of similar position where we're seeing a lot of things in the media. We understand the main sustainability initiatives that are going on with the Paris Agreement, all of those things. There's a lot of waste in our world. We've generated it, it's there, it's going to be there, it's not going anywhere. But we have to start somewhere. And actually, sometimes when we see the media and we see the press and we understand all these big concepts, it's actually quite hard to sort of work out exactly as a small brand or as an individual, like how you might relate to that. There's lots of people starting, but everybody might have already started. Everybody might have already considered, where their material's coming from or where their waste is going, etc. But it's like, how can we do that and keep doing that and start building that up and making that a continual process, really, within the work that we do, the products that we make. It's important what's out there in the world, and we need to be more mindful of that. And so what we're kind of saying, and I think as a colour and material designer and as a trend researcher, is that I know that as virgin materials start to phase out, we will have this raft of recycled materials, second life materials that will need to be continually incorporated into our products in order for us to not waste them, not go to landfill, but then to be useful. And they're there. They're going to be the materials of the future. We can't deny that. So how can we be creative about that? And where can we start? Because it means it's like this surmountable task. It's like a really huge pile of rubbish. And we're not just talking about waste like your classical consumer waste, things that are in your kind of dustbin, plastic waste, but also things that are coming from the food industry or from different industries as well. So it could be like colour or materials that come from a byproduct from the restaurant industry, for instance. It could be waste food, it could be waste plastics. There are actually lots of places that waste is actually being generated at the moment, so how can we kind of be creative about that, really? And so you might not be able to see that so well. It's actually not showing so well. But those three conscious decisions, there's three directions, trend directions, which we're going to share with you. And they're all there to kind of liberate, really, and to kind of get you thinking, inspire you to move forward with recycled material and colour in different ways. So the first one is, which is part of the manifesto, is this idea of using visibly recycled colour in your work. And so actually putting the aesthetics of recycled content out as one of the main, I suppose, visual and tactile expressions of your brand. It's signing to people and to consumers, which is quite important. The communication to consumers is really important, that you're actively using something that might have been used previously before, so it's got a second life to it or a second kind of colour to it. And so we've really seen, a real kind of movement in this direction. So these trend boards I originally put together to express this current kind of visual mood. You can sort of see lots of different types of companies that are starting to really pick up on this trend. And you've got like lots of kind of speckled, intermixed. Colour is not this kind of fixed one tone as it's previously been. And sort of embracing kind of like irregularity, a sort of speckled composition. And that's because they're coming from remnants or second places, basically. They're coming from a recycled plastic, or specifically the jumper that you can see up there is by Toast. They're from remnants of previous garments and remnants of previous yarns. So they're not creating, necessarily a fixed product every time. And actually that's the beauty and the sort of serendipitous creative quality that's behind some of these projects, is that they're really unique, right? And Sarah, I know you work with some of these brands or have consulted with them as well. So I wonder if you could have a bit of a take on this particular trend as well.
Yeah, sure. I think this is really exciting, actually. This is really interesting opportunity for people because, as Laura's saying, with these remnants of materials that are being made into new products, you don't always know what you're going to get, which can be really joyful. And if you don't like what you get, then you can start again. But there's an opportunity there, which I think for creatives is quite joyful and exciting. So I think what we're looking at here really is about a transformation in our views of what waste is, from something that's like icky and dirty and useless to something that is our resource. And increasingly we're going to have to look at it as our virgin resource, because all the virgin resources have pretty much run out. So we need to really look at it in a different way. And I think that's what is really interesting about what these brands are doing. And what happens when you pick up fragments from old materials is that they bring their stories along with them. So all of those different yarns, they've all come from different cultures, and they've all got this ancestry that then feeds into the story of the jumper. With the little notebook you see there, that's part of Liga's collection, and they do a beach clean collection. They're based in Cornwall. They see the little fragments of plastic, the microplastics washing up on the beach, which we're all frantically trying to collect but feeling like we're having no effect whatsoever. But then by converting it into a project, it's really empowering, and then you can actually see that thing that seemed worthless and seemed like a hazard has become something that has value, and also that communicates that it's worth making an effort and it's worth creating new things, but in new ways. I suppose something else about this theme is that it's quite democratic. You can see from really, really small brands who are using the waste that they produce individually, things like coffee grounds and things like that, and incorporating literally their own waste, right up to Nike's Space Hippie, which is a massive enterprise and really inspirational kind of futuristic project. So you can achieve really aspirational products with something very humble. And then the cups at the bottom, I know quite well because I work with Circular & Co, who created these cups. And what really inspires me about them is that there was no process to turn a disposable coffee cup into anything. We all had decided that there's nothing we can do about this. It's a kind of hybrid of plastic and paper. It's impossible to recycle, and we'd kind of drawn a line out under it. But Circular & Co. have managed to create a process where they've made that into a reusable material, and they've done it in such a way that you can take it apart, you can recreate it. So it is genuinely a product for life. I won't go on anymore because we've got two other themes.
I think there's a variety of materials on this board as well. There's natural waste from birch and badger, which are at the bottom, which is using recycled seashells, so mussel shells from the restaurant industry, all the way through to kind of Nike Space hippie shoe, which is a very aspirational example of how they've recycled their own industrial waste from their factories. So again, it's waste in general, but there is lots of multi-materials and possibilities, and it's there just to kind of inspire everyone to think about how they can connect with something that might mean something for their brands, whether it's working within an industry or reclaiming something out of your own kind of process. I think is quite important.
I think also what's interesting about, for example, the badger and birch range is that obviously terrazzo, that sort of terrazzo look has been so popular in interiors in the last few seasons, and the way they're doing it, that by using that natural material, the natural shells to create the terrazzo, is just giving it a really lovely, just tangible feeling, and it's that story as well behind it. It's that kind of that biophilic connection to nature, which can psychologically help us feel more connected and attached to something, and just give it greater sort of value and meaning to us as well. And then from my sort of journalist hat and my trend writing hat, it's always really interesting to learn about those kind of backstories as well and understand where things are coming from. So I think it's really important to communicate that in your communications. Yeah,
for sure. And we had this part of the kind of the manifesto was that it was how to harness this trend. So these are like our top tips for how you can kind of take away as a brand or as a designer ways that you can reincorporate and think about using waste in different ways. So it might be, you have to start somewhere, and if you don't have a story already or have a material like a recycled material that you're already working with, it's like, how can you start to think about incorporating them? So it could be something as simple as a label or a piece of packaging, starting there first, changing that element before looking at a bigger manufacturing change within your products. It could also be phasing in a recycled material into a certain element, so kind of replacing a certain part that's made with a normal plastic or a normal material at the moment, and looking at ways in which a recycled material could fit into a certain component that already exists. So you start to be really honest, you start to bring in these stories into your products, and also thinking about looking at salvage waste, local waste as well, increasing your kind of story as well, which is what Jo was sort of mentioning there. And anything else you want to add, Sarah?
Just from what you were just saying there, I was thinking about how you bring your customer along on that journey, because that's something that we've talked about when we've been talking about these different themes, is that I think it's really important that your customer understands that you can't solve every problem at once, but I think we really appreciate being a shared experience and being told, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, this has worked, this hasn't worked, and that really fosters brand loyalty, and I think people really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And it could be just incorporating like little points of messaging within your packaging or within your communications. That's just say, we're trying out this product, we're trying out this recycled material, this is how you can recycle it. It could go into your trash, or you can take it here, and then you offer a bit ability for people to give you feedback on that. You can change your communications. I think that's the point in all of this, is that everyone is kind of learning and navigating this sustainability issue, and there's nothing wrong with changing and adding value at different points as you kind of go along this journey. I think, especially for consumers, they'll really appreciate the honesty value, I think.
I was just agreeing with you basically, but yeah, I was just going to say that I think that's quite nice when you are bringing someone along as part of the journey. So rather than just being like, we're a really green brand and not necessarily going into that, it's kind of like, here's what we're doing really well, here's what we're not doing so well, and here's the sort of steps we're taking to try and address this particular issue. And we were talking about actually how Oddbox, the veg box company, is quite a good example of that, because in all of their deliveries, they do give you a little leaflet and they explain like, oh, these carrots are a bit wonky and what it might be, and this has already got plastic on it because we didn't want to, it came like that and we didn't want to take it off, so we don't want to greenwash you. So I think it's just about having this really honest, open dialogue of where you are and your journey, really.
Yeah, so within each of these examples, we've sort of chosen an exhibitor from Top Drawer that's really trying to move forward and try out this approach, really. So this is one that I chose, No Shrinking Violet. They're just downstairs in the kind of gift and stationery area. They're using the sort of the idea of recorporation, quite almost like stretching it completely to its end. So they've got a set colour palette, but they're using every single scrap, every single material that they're making with is used again, reused, recorporated, and it stretches out their palette almost. And every little scrap or remnant is reincorporated into the next set of earrings or the next set of jewellery pieces. So there's nothing is ever going to waste, but then it's also evolving their colour palettes in really interesting ways because it's stretching those colours. It's sort of it's going with that serendipitous quality. It's never producing something that's repeatable, but it's actually being mindful of the fact that they don't want to create any waste as well. So it's a really sort of simple approach, really. They're not necessarily using a recycled material, but their approach is not to waste. And I think there's other like simple ways that you could approach your products like that. But I think for me that's quite a simple translation of the trend, let's say, at this moment in time. I've got two clickers here. Oh, have I? Sorry about that. Okay, second one. It's more about how these trends also interconnect. This idea of brand colours creating much more kind of fluid palettes. So if we're starting to use some of these wasted materials and reincorporating them, they're obviously going to be going through a second, third, fourth, 5 life cycle of, you know, their lives, I think, if you think about it like that. So they're naturally going to extrapolate colour. They're naturally going to create a palette, a bandwidth for brands. So I think this is a really interesting one for brands that are now, you know, brands are expanding. You've got a massive digital presence as well as a physical product presence. You don't need the same fixed colour in all of those scenarios. So why not explore the kind of the availability of these recycled or waste materials in your kind of product range, and not hem yourself in with one colour, like one brand colour. And that's actually quite a sort of new way of thinking. You know, we've had lots of brands. We're very familiar with brands and their colours. Ferrari red, you know, Pantane's yellow of the year, kind of sticking with those colours, which I think is really, you know, it's the way that we've been thinking about colour. But actually, if we're going to start moving forward and working with lots of different types of materials and leftovers, almost reincorporating that kind of mentality, we're ultimately never going to have a fixed colour ever again. That's quite an interesting concept, and one to definitely explore from a kind of brand point of view. And so I'm just highlighting a few brands here that are already kind of doing that in interesting ways. So you kind of already are starting even on that kind of gift market or the kind of home market with someone like Wax Atelier, who are starting to bring in natural colours. So things like woad and indigo have had a massive resurgence recently. We've seen lots of brands sort of take up natural colour again. The beauty of some of those colours is they're never going to be the same, no matter when they're dyed, the type of indigo, where it comes from, the time of year. It means that colour's going to stretch out, and we're a lot more kind of akin to the benefits of nature these days. We've just spent this entire time in lockdown, and nature was like our solace. It was a thing that kept us going. We understand the value in nature, and so going back to natural colours has had a real kind of change, I think, in our mentality as consumers. We still sort of see the value in natural colours. And then there's other companies that are sort of doing similar things. Granby Street Workshops, which is the ceramic range at the bottom here, they have a series of colours in their range, like 5 or 6 in their physical products, but they're constantly recycling their glazes and they're constantly recycling their own ceramic waste. So naturally, all of those colours start to intermingle and stretch across their products because they're totally reincorporating them all the time. And so when you see it, a beautiful shelf of all of their ceramics, they all serendipitously have a set of colours, and they're making intercolours by the fact that they're mixing but that's actually a really celebrative thing and a beautiful thing, isn't it? And the fact that, you know, we don't have to stick with one specific shade is something that can stretch across physical product, e-commerce, as well as this kind of digital expression. So yeah, there's other brands doing similar things, aren't there, Sarah, as well?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting one because it's quite contentious, really, the idea of switching up your brand colours, both in terms of your product and your brand identity. And I think for a lot of people, they understand that their customer recognise them by that colour, and it feels quite frightening to lose that fixed colour as part of who they are. And there are some really interesting discussions going on around now, and it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out over the next few years. But the cup in the centre, the Costa cup, is quite a nice example of how you've got a compromise going on there, where they've recycled old Costa cups and the flecks within the resin are theirs. So you've got that kind of burgundy tone. They've added a little bit of master batch colour, so there's still synthetic colour there, but they've really reduced it back. So they're just beginning to see how they can play with taking baby steps, I suppose, in that direction. But yeah, I think there are some interesting conversations to be had amongst the stakeholders of brands to where colour sits within your identity and how much you can flex that. And it's a playful time. It's a time where you can... Joe, you were talking about different seasons of colour, and I think that ties in really well here.
Yeah, I was quite interested when I was researching for my book. I was looking quite a lot at colour seasonal, like personality colour psychology, which is normally broken down into spring, summer, autumn, winter, and the sort of the general. It's such a big topic, like, you know, hours talking just on that. But essentially, the idea is that if you're choosing one specific season, all of the colours within that will have a specific undertone that helps them all to tie in together. So, for example, if you think of autumnal colours, which are that sort of lovely, rich, warm ochres and russet reds and that kind of thing, they all have this kind of black undertone to them, which gives them that earthy element. Whereas spring is sort of very vibrant, fresh, and those colours won't have any black in their undertone. So that can be a really useful way to think about those colours. If you think about your season, Angela Wright is a really good person. She has the Colour Effects website if anyone wants to delve into it a bit more. But yeah, that's just a really interesting way of thinking about, well, my colour personality for my brand or my business is going to be autumn, and just making sure everything has that consistency of the undertone, and that doesn't sort of rule out any colour groups. It just sort of rules out specific tones that feel very off. So I think that's an interesting way to kind of use that as a guideline almost.
Yeah, it helps you create much more bandwidth, doesn't it, basically, and broadens out your palette a little bit more, but with some logic, I think, as well. And also, you know, sort of moving away from what we conceptually think as a seasonal-led colour into what's actually an available colour. So it could be, you know, something that's available, you know, because it's a waste stream that's become available, and we use that, so it means that we can create a range, but actually it's not going to be repeatable over a long period of time, but it's just what we have access to, rather than just thinking, oh, it's all about this particular colour this season and we have to work towards that and fix that. You can obviously tune colours up and down, which is what Joe's saying, and sort of work with seasonal nuances, but actually keep your palette being a bit more kind of mindful and considerate of the actual materials and colours that you're using, I think, as well. Go on to the kind of harness the trend part, which is, yeah, again, about just being a lot less codified, and allowing palettes to accommodate range if they do have these more responsibly led colour initiatives in them. And then also, that idea of availability and commercial seasonal led opposed to commercial seasonal led. And then also this idea of using your own branded colour waste. So reincorporating your own coloured waste into your products will lead your palette into some further areas and nuances, which is a really kind of beautiful concept, really. And one of the example top drawer exhibitors, I think Sarah's going to talk about.
Yeah, so turtle bags are a really, really interesting story for this, both because this botanic range that they've got here at the show are using natural plant-based colours. So they're using pomegranate. I can't remember the name of the fire one. There's... what is it called? Flame of the Forest, which I knew as a different kind of plant completely, and madder. So I think just starting from that, you've got 3 botanic colours that have all got heritage, and that is a storytelling point in my mind. I mean, pomegranate is associated with ancient love stories. You've got the story of Persephone and Hades, and you can go down that angle if that works with your brand. With madder, you've got the ancient use of it. You could be thinking about Romans, Vikings, Shakespeare, whatever, but there's all these different angles that I think with a plant-based colour, because it has that heritage, you can tap into that heritage, and that can really help you find alignments with your brand and flesh out stories that enrich the product and what you're trying to say about it. The other thing I really loved about this was that they're working very holistically. They're inspired by the plastic bags that are going into the oceans and harming turtles, hence the name turtle bags. And some of their money goes towards charities that help marine conservation. But also the cotton that they use in their bags is all organic, and they're working really closely with farmers to help that transition, which is really radical where they're working. The switch to an organic way of farming is really risky, because when you've gone down that route where you've just added more water, more pesticide for decades, you get yourself to a point where it feels like, I think, all you can do is add more. And by stepping back and just letting the land do what it does naturally and risk having a few lean years is massively risky. But they've taken that route and they've seen the benefits of it, and to the extent now that they've got profits that are funding schools, they've got social enterprises going on. It's really, really working, and it's spreading around the region where they're working. So I think that holistic sense of you're working with colour, there's that stimulus there, but it helps you join other dots as well. It's part of a greater connectedness.
Yeah, also, and I think also like aesthetically, those bags fade, don't they? Which is lovely. It's like a lovely kind of colour story that the more you use them, the more they fade. They get interpreted by use, and that's also a really lovely kind of connection for consumers to have with products, that that the more you use them, the more you build up a relationship with them and you take care of them. You might repair these bags ultimately and keep them going, and the colour story is there too.
I think it's also reframing that as a positive as well. So rather than feeling like you almost have to be apologetic, like, oh, I'm sorry, this might fade, it's kind of like, isn't this great? You're buying this product that in 3 months' time is going to be quite a different colour, and then in 6 months, and maybe you could even dye it yourself when it's kind of faded to completely white or off-white. So I think that's a really interesting part of the story.
Yeah, there's a lovely pace to that as well, I think, isn't there? That most of the colour that we use outlives us and outlives the product. But having that same pace between you and the colour and your products, there's something really pleasing about that.
Definitely. I think that kind of leads us really nicely on to the last theme, which is about harnessing local colour identity. So that's a lot more about kind of connecting with local sources of colour, bringing that really, really highly integrally into your brand story and your brand messages and your products as well. And we've seen this sort of happening quite a lot in trends, and I suppose in companies that have got really high ethical and sustainable practices. So there's a lovely story here with the brand Hakel's, who are based in Margate. They make lots of kind of skincare, well-being products. They are inspired by the natural environment, so lots of their colours, from their kind of packaging all the way through to their labelling, and even like the colouring of their candles is made from things like seaweed, the natural algae that grows within the kind of landscape. They're very interested in like bio-organic ingredients, and so each of those bio-ingredients has a colour to it, and that's what's used typographically even all the way through their product range. And they're really fostering a sense of community as well, so it's inspired locally, it's a locally made colour palette, and it's like really integral to their brand. And there's other people doing this as well, such as Black Horse Atelier. They're a local denim brand in North London actually, and they're making everything on site, that all the denim is made. We're even looking about how they can grow indigo locally, harvest it and dye denim, all within an incredibly small footprint of where they're existing, where they're making things, and so it's a really lovely kind of way of interpreting this story, isn't it? I'm sure, Joe, some ways that this could be harnessed further.
Yeah, well, it also reminded me of a brand I talked about briefly in my book, which who are called Dust London, and they're based. I think they're based in Clerkenwell area, and they go around the local offices collecting their used tea bags, and then they use them to mix with a bio resin to create plant pots and vases, and they've separated out their different tea waste. So the chamomile tea waste makes this sort of really lovely kind of minty colour, whereas the sort of builder's tea waste is that sort of just slightly lovely kind of just kind of light brown colour. And so I thought they were really interesting, and that's also when we talk about natural colour, it doesn't have to necessarily be that the literal colour has come from your locality. It can be the story that they've collected these tea bags locally, or if you're working with brands or makers in other countries, thinking about what's local to them and their area as well, and again just embracing that kind of embracing the slight flexibility of the colour, but also the idea that you can sort your colour waste if you do have a specific palette that you're trying to create, especially in the sort of interiors side of things. If you're, for example, making kind of tiles or tabletop surfaces, something like that, where you might need to specify it against other colours and paints going into that scheme, you can still have that element of control over that process as well. So.
Yeah, and I think definitely harnessing this trend is about a community approach, isn't it? So in terms of retail, this has got massive, I think, translation as well. So it could be that you're engaging local makers, making colour, making the entire product in store, engaging the community, and really kind of scaling up the experience of colour and materials and your product, which is about like fostering what those local community connections are going to be, and also sort of showing and telling these stories as well. I think that's quite important. And also exploring this idea of a small footprint, so not gathering materials and colour that are too far from where you're actually based. And lots of people really like that. Localities had massive resurgence over COVID. The idea of buying locally, investing in, local produce, local makers, locally sourced things, it has grown substantially in this time. And I think there's a real opportunity there to build on that further, almost like look for a beautiful botanical plant source that gives you a gorgeous colour within your product ranges that you can actually say, hey, this was actually from just down the road, we made it, or we've just cultivated a community project that's helping us grow that colour. And I think those are some of the real kind of takeaways that are important within this trend. And we chose an exhibitor, didn't we, that's doing a really good job in this area, I think.
Yes, yeah. So so this was my pick for local colour, Gone Rural. So they are a social enterprise, and they support 780 women, and it's a multi-generational company. So the skills and the wisdom is passed down sort of between the mothers and the daughters, basically. And so their whole range is made from Lutinzi grass, which is grown on the rocky outcrops of the Swazi Mountains, where the women work and are from, obviously. And it's harvested seasonally and sustainably, and then they process these grasses and dye them with environmentally friendly colours, and then they weave them into the various product ranges that Gone Rural stock. So there's baskets and lots of kind of tabletop items as well, and some more kind of decorative pieces too. But I think what's really nice about them as well is that they the weave that they use is called the Lavumisa, if I'm saying that right, which is a traditional weave that's, again, passed down between the generations of women. So it's not just literally a workforce creating a product based to somebody else's spec. It's kind of got their own inherent culture and personality in there as well. So that's just a really lovely kind of story and an interesting way of thinking about how you can work with colours. And what I thought was interesting as well, or what I think is kind of a point that it flags up, is to be kind of respectful of the heritage styles of different countries and peoples, and where possible trying to bring those authentic products into your brand, whether you're a buyer or a retailer, rather than sort of just choosing a product that has that pattern just sort of printed on it or something. It's just being really authentic in that story.
Mindful. So that is the end of the sort of 3 trend directions. You can find out more about them, their origins, where they came from, and then there's 3 more that are available on the Circular Manifesto for Colour, which is on Medium. I just want to thank Joe and Sarah for joining me today. You can ask us any questions, and you're totally welcome to get in touch with us, follow us on Instagram. We have Radical Colour, which is the publishing platform for the Circular Manifesto for Colour on Medium, so it's at Radical Colour. You can also see our different Instagram handles, and you're welcome to get in touch with any questions that you have. We will also be here for the next 5-10 minutes. I'll also be doing a book giveaway in case anyone is here waiting for a book that they've won on Instagram. And yeah, please come and ask us further, because it is a big topic, and we hope that we've inspired you a little bit to think about how you might consider colour in a more mindful and ethical way in your brand. So thank you.
Thank you.